Well, it is final. Would you be willing to do it?
The healing prayer, I
In
mean, with,
addition to your music, you were going to do your music, right?
yeah.
So before you did your music, if Mansour isn't here by that time
Oh, I
to
see. Sure.
confirm that he's going to do the healing prayer, would you do it?
Yeah, I sure will.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Who's the speaker today?
Greg Watson. You know,
Oh,
Greg, right?
yeah, I know Greg. Good.
Yeah, he's going to speak today. So it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So is Barbara with us, or are you taking over?
No, Barbara's here.
Oh, okay.
On your screen where it says Barbara, that's her. Where it's just her, just one name. It says Barbara. That's her. She was looking for actually Greg.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got you. Okay. Very good.
Okay, Alapa.
Allahu Akbar.
Papa.
I'm going to continue my breakfast.
Okay,
I'm going to
wonderful.
leave for a minute so you won't see me stuffing my face.
So Barbara, are you here? Not Barbara McClendon, Barbara Hennix.
Yes.
Okay. Because you can see that Greg's here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You said you were going looking. Hello. How are you? Greg, you're muted.
Hey, Greg, haven't seen you in ages. Barbara McClendon.
Oh, hi, Barbara. Wow.
When did you come back?
December 2018.
Oh, my goodness. No, you've been quiet.
I've got 2 places to sign in. I don't know if I should click on join the meeting twice. I guess I'll just get rid of that off the screen. There we go. Let's see. I'm going to reverse these. How's everyone?
Very good. Meanwhile, for those of you who are present, I'm looking for volunteer readers for our devotions this morning. Would any of you be interested in volunteering?
I'll volunteer.
Barbara McClendon. Great. Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else?
Wow. Don't be scared.
Elizabeth? Would you be willing to read?
Hello. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Would you be willing to read this morning?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's what you have to do is draft us.
So I discovered over the past few months.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Anyone else interested in reading this morning? You can unmute yourself or just raise your hand if your picture's there. If not, you need to raise it electronically. I need 7 more readers. Anyone can volunteer.
I can read.
Great, Dorothy.
I'll go, again, if it gets to be hard.
I can read.
And who said I can read?
From Lee Lorosmi.
Oh, okay, great.
Mansur will say the healing prayer.
Is he here?
Allah.
Oh,
He
there you
will
are.
be shortly. He will be shortly.
Allahu Akbar. Don, now you know. Mansour
Oh.
will lead the prayer.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I need 5 more readers.
Well, then now I'll be a reader then, since I won't be doing that prayer.
Okay, great. Don.
Just don't make me first because I'll be stuffing my face.
You will be, who is that?
Barbara McClendon.
Well, I had you first because you volunteered first.
Okay. I'll just hold off when it's time.
Well, if a few of you would not mind reading twice, then Barbara, I will call on you again. Elizabeth, I'll call on you again.
Okay.
Lee, I'll call on you again. And Lee, I'll call on you again, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Thank you. Well, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
All right, friends. If you're not speaking, please mute yourselves. Thank you. Gonna go ahead and get started. Allahu Akbar, dear friends. God is most glorious. Welcome to the Sunday morning devotional program for the Baha'i Unity Center here in South DeKalb County, Georgia. So wonderful to have all of you with us today. Across the globe, you know, the teachings of the Baha'i faith brought to us more than 150 years ago by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, its founder, and whose name in Arabic means the glory of God. His teachings have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities, which allows us to reflect the image God made us in, the integration of worship and service with work performed in the spirit of service, actually being accounted as worship in the eyes of God, the fundamental equality of the sexes, more widely evidenced in a setting of equal opportunity, the centrality of justice in all human endeavor, the importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that strive to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. Friends, we've been having wonderful Sunday morning programs each week, and today is no different. We're pleased to have you join us. Again, welcome. We'll begin with opening devotions, followed by some music from Don Erdman. Please silence your electronic devices if you are speaking for sure. Thank you. Let's see, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Oh, I just want to make sure. Okay. Barbara?
Oh my God, my Lord and my Master, I have detached myself from my kindred and have sought through thee to become independent of all that dwell on earth and ever ready to receive that which is praiseworthy in thy sight. Bestow on me such good as will make me independent of aught else but thee, and grant me an ampler share of thy boundless favors. Verily, thou art the Lord of grace abounding. The Bob.
Thank you, Barbara. Elizabeth?
Many a chilled heart, oh my God,
hath been set ablaze with the fire of thy cause, and many a slumberer hath been wakened by the sweetness of thy voice. How many are the strangers who have sought shelter beneath the shadow of the tree of thy oneness, and how numerous the thirsty ones who have panted after the fountain of thy living waters in thy days. Blessed is he that hath set himself towards thee and hasted to attain the dayspring of the lights of thy face, dawning place of thy revelation, and the fountainhead of thine inspiration. Blessed is he that hath expended in thy path what thou didst bestow upon him through thy bounty and favor. Blessed is he who in his sore longing after thee hath cast away all else except thyself. Blessed is he who hath enjoyed intimate communion with thee and rid himself of all attachment to anyone save thee. I beseech thee, O my Lord, by who is thy name, who through the power of thy sovereignty and might hath risen above the horizon of his prison to ordain for everyone what becometh thee, and beseemeth thine exaltation. Thy might in truth is equal to all things. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Dorothy Steele.
Glorified art thou, O Lord, my God. I beseech thee by him who is thy most great name, who hath been sorely afflicted by such of thy creatures as have repudiated thy truth, and who hath been hemmed in by sorrows, which no tongue can describe, to grant that I may remember thee and celebrate thy praise. In these days when all have turned away from thy beauty, have disputed with thee and turned away disdainfully from him who is the revealer of thy cause. None is there, O my Lord, to help thee except thine own self, and no power to succor thee save thine own power. I entreat thee to enable me to cleave steadfastly to thy love and thy remembrance. This is verily within my power, and thou art the one that knoweth all that is in me. Thou, in truth, art knowing, appraised of all. Deprive me not, O my Lord, of the splendors of the light of thy face, whose brightness hath illuminated the whole world. No God is there beside thee, the most powerful, the all-glorious, the ever-forgiving. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Dorothy. Lee.
O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to thee. These hearts are radiant with thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of thy glad tidings. O God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to promulgate the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American nation is worthy of thy favors and is deserving of thy mercy. Make it precious and near to thee through thy bounty and bestowal.
Thank you, Lee. Don?
Okay. Oh, there it is. Thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine, sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thy glance of favor upon us, give light to our eyes, hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom and resuscitate all of us through the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thy indissoluble bond. Verily, thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty. Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you, Don. Barbara McClendon?
Okay. My object is none other than the betterment of the world and the tranquility of its peoples, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. This unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels which the pen of the Most High hath revealed are suffered to pass unheeded. Through the power of the words he had uttered, the whole of the human race can be illumined with the light of unity, and the remembrance of his name is able to set on fire the hearts of all men and burn away the veils that intervene between them and his glory. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Barbara. Elizabeth?
Justice is in this day bewailing its plight. Inequity groaneth beneath the yoke of oppression. The thick clouds of tyranny have darkened the face of the earth and enveloped peoples. Through the movement of our pen of glory, we have at the beginning of the omnipotent ordainer breathed a new life into every human frame and instilled into every word a fresh potency. All created things proclaim the evidences of this worldwide regeneration. This is the most great, the most joyful tidings imparted by the pen of this wronged one to mankind. Wherefore, fear ye, O my well-beloved ones. Who is it that can dismay ye? A touch of moisture sufficeth to dissolve the hardened clay out of which this perverse generation is molded. The mere act of your gathering today is enough to scatter the forces of these vain and worthless people. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Dorothy?
Baha'u'llah has proclaimed the oneness of the world of humanity. He has caused various nations and divergent creeds to unite. He has declared the difference of race and color is like the variegated beauty of flowers in a garden. If you enter a garden, you will see yellow, white, blue, red flowers in profusion and beauty. each radiant within itself, and although different from the others, lending its own charm to them. Racial difference in the human kingdom is similar. If all flowers in the garden were the same color, the effect would be monotonous and wearing to the eye. Therefore, Baha'u'llah has said that the various races of humankind lend a composite harmony and beauty of color to the whole. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together side by side, without discord or disagreement between them. Abdu'l Baha.
Thank you, Dorothy. Lee?
To discriminate against any race on the ground of its being socially backward, politically immature, and numerically in a minority is a flagrant violation of the spirit that animates the faith of Baha'u'llah. The consciousness of any division or cleavage in its ranks is alien to its very purpose, principles, and ideals. Once its members have fully recognized the claim of its author, and by identifying themselves with its administrative order, accepted unreservedly the principles and laws embodied in its teachings, every differentiation of class, creed, or color must automatically be obliterated and never be allowed under any pretext, and however great the pressure of events or of public opinion, to reassert itself. Yogi Fendi.
Thank you, Lee. And thank you to our readers. Friends, it's now time for the healing prayer. Mansoor Sobhani will be our guest presenter for the healing prayer this morning. If any of you wish to remember a loved one through the prayer for healing, please feel free to call out their name at this time. Thank you.
Ayana,
Walter Harper,
Barbara McClendon, Richard G., Richard A., Jack Arnold,
Josie Reynolds,
Peter Vaughn,
Pat and Bradley,
Anne Aglin,
Cordia Smith and family,
Keith Johnson,
Kristen Stratton, Ruth Ann, Richard Wade, Ronald Wade,
Janie and Joe.
Cynthia Allen,
Thy name is my healing, oh my God. A remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing, and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all bountiful, the all knowing, the all wise, Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Mansoor. That was beautiful. Thank you. Friends, each week we're blessed to have a guest presenter to come and share with us their insights on a particular topic. This week, we're honored to have Dr. Gregory Watson, who has over the years given presentations to this community on various subjects. Dr. Watson entered his doctoral program at Harvard University in 1987 with an education master's degree and obtained a second education master's during his doctoral studies. He served as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Education for 2 years. He was a research fellow at the Harvard Institute for International Development and taught developmental psychology at the University of Massachusetts in the graduate program for teachers. He also was the senior education advisor for the Council for Global Education, Washington, D.C. His master's work focused on the origin of exceptional abilities in preschool children, and his dissertation was on global citizenship as the moral ethic of global competence, a systems approach to social justice and unity. We are pleased to have him share with us this day. So friends, please welcome Dr. Watson, who will enlighten us with his presentation on teaching the oneness of humanity to humanity. Dr. Gregory Watson.
Like this, or is it better here?
We can hear you better now.
Okay. I want to test. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and that so many have joined this morning. I have 2 screens. I want to make sure only one of them shows. Let's test it.
And Greg, hold the microphone just as ever so slightly further from your face, because it's catching your breath also.
Okay. How's that? Is that better?
Very good.
Okay, so if I'm sharing my screen, you're seeing too much. What I probably need to do is turn one off. I don't know how to do that.
We haven't seen anything yet.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Okay, I've clicked share screen.
Now, is the thing that you want to share already open before you go to share screen?
It is.
To be. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and so you clicked on it.
I just clicked on share screen.
And then do you see what it is that you want to share?
Yes.
Click that.
Okay.
And then there you are.
Is that it?
Yes.
Yes, we see it.
Okay. So you see
Teaching the oneness of humanity. We see the first slide and then your other slides to the left of it.
Uh-huh.
Small.
Let's try to do that.
That is fine.
Do you see 2 screens or one?
No,
Just
one screen, just one. I'll communicate with them. Thank you all.
Okay. And it just shows the world and teaching the oneness of humanity to humanity.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move rather quickly because this was a longer presentation that was given to a group of Chinese scholars in the Global Village and adapted somewhat for this morning. I'm not sure how many slides we'll actually get through. Here we go.
Okay.
We must Not sure why it doesn't go back. It went all the way to the end. Aha. Okay, let's try again. We need this soon if we're to survive. We must help humanity transform our otherness consciousness into the consciousness of oneness. Let the darkness of racism, xenophobia, oppression, and genocide be dispelled, and let the tempest of discord be stilled, and the peoples of the world find rest. This is essentially a quote from Baha'u'llah. All the peoples of the world have a common destiny, and all are forever interdependent. Let us be united so that we can build the world community, build the world civilization in peace. Let us see ourselves clearly with 2020 vision in 2020 and 2021. O children of men, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other? Ponder at all times in your hearts how you were created, that from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness may be made manifest. Now, in this one hidden word of Baha'u'llah, I think we find the key to all our problems, both real and imaginary, with respect to the disunity of the human race. And I'll attempt to dwell on it a little more deeply as we go forward. In every dispensation, writes Abdu'l-Baha, the light of divine guidance has been focused upon one central theme. In this wondrous revelation, the foundation of the faith of God and the distinguishing feature of his law is the consciousness of the oneness of mankind. Now, this is somewhat fascinating if you consider that we're living in a dispensation that's to last 1,000 years, and in a cycle that's to last 500,000 years. And it's focused on one central theme. So if it's going to take 1,000 years to focus on this theme, it's occurring to me that at the outset, we may not understand it very well and how it must be developed. That it's not just an idea or something we sort of embrace as an idea. The House of Justice has written that though through world unity is possible, nay, inevitable, it ultimately cannot be achieved without unreserved acceptance of the oneness of humankind, described by the Guardian as the pivot round which all the teachings of Baha'u'llah revolve. Again, the central principle of the faith. Again, the House of Justice writes that the bedrock of a strategy that can engage the world's population in assuming responsibility for its collective destiny must be the consciousness of the oneness of humankind. They say it's deceptively simple in popular discourse. The concept that humanity constitutes a single people presents fundamental challenges to the way that most of the institutions of contemporary society carry out their functions. So, if it's deceptively simple, then we may be under illusions of what it means and how to embrace it. That so fundamental a revolution involving such far-reaching changes in the structure of society can be achieved through the ordinary processes of diplomacy and education seems highly improbable. We have but to turn our gaze to humanity's blood-stained history to realize that nothing short of intense mental as well as physical agony has been able to precipitate those epoch-making changes that constitute the greatest landmarks in the history of human civilization. We now, all of us have experienced that love for others is often derived from one's own suffering, and the time in which we're living is full of new levels of suffering that hopefully will help us develop that love for others. People are more loving towards each other after suffering through some tragedy together. Peace on earth depends on world unity. World unity is the great harmony spoken of in the Chinese culture, but the people of the world must build it together. But the people will not build without hope and belief. And hope comes from a vision of a possibility. Hope can also be a belief in the inevitable. Humanity is gripped by a crisis of identity as various peoples and groups struggle to define themselves, their place in the world, and how they should act. Without a vision of shared identity and common purpose, they fall into competing ideologies and power struggles. Seemingly, countless permutations of us and them define group identities ever more narrowly and in contrast to one another. Over time, this splintering into divergent interest groups has weakened the cohesion of society itself. Statement from the House of Justice in 2019. The present world unrest, symptom of a worldwide malady, must needs culminate in that world catastrophe out of which the consciousness of world citizenship will be born. A consciousness that can alone provide an adequate basis for the organization of world unity, on which a lasting world peace must necessarily depend, that peace itself inaugurating in turn that world civilization, which will mark the coming of age of the entire human race. So this kind of series of, or progress of humanity towards this ultimate goal is marked by some very difficult periods, and beginning here in this statement of a world catastrophe, which we may be seeing the beginnings of now. The Guardian presents world citizenship as the prerequisite stage to world unity and as the sense of moral responsibility to build that unity. The House of Justice has for some time been drawing our attention to another prerequisite, the consciousness of oneness, which is the principle underlying world citizenship. They state that in a document presented at the United Nations. Should this not then be our present focus as educators, recognizing the stage where humanity is stuck? By this, we're starting to realize new implications for methods to teach world citizenship education, realizing that attaining a consciousness of oneness is the central process of acquiring world citizenship identity. So in the Baha'i writings, we have seen primarily from the Guardian an outline of these stages. Baha'u'llah himself has said that the world's peace and its security is unattainable unless and until its unity is first achieved. Unity depends on a willingness to build that unity, however, and building unity comes from a sense of responsibility. World citizenship is that sense of responsibility. World citizenship is a superordinate identity. This identity depends upon a perception of oneness. The consciousness of the oneness of humanity depends on understanding the realities of what a human being is and understanding the profound interconnection of all living systems in our global environment. Oneness is the stage where we are today. We are in need of a perception of this identity of what a human being is based on science. Who do you think you are? Identity and self-interest widen with a more accurate perception of one's world. You identify with your family or your clan or your tribe or your city, state, region, your nationality, your religion, your culture, and ultimately the possibility for identifying with all the peoples of the earth. As these ever-expanding loyalties widen, we get a greater sense of belonging and wholeness to the human race. It's good to remember where we are. Out of utter nothingness, the creation was called into being, infinite in its range and deathless in its duration, Baha'u'llah says. How could sheer nothingness have acquired by itself the worthiness and capacity to emerge from its state of non-existence into the realm of being? I present this as the first level of remembering who we are and where we come from. The earth, our home, invisible in the vastness of space. This is where we are, all the Earth's people together. The Earth is fragile, life is fragile. We must care for each other to ensure the survival and know that we are one people. We're the flowers of one garden, we're the waves of one sea, we're the leaves of one tree. One planet, one people, please. Let us live as one. I've just mentioned the high goal, and I must share how I think we can achieve it, except first, according to the Chinese philosophy and the I Ching, the dangers, problems, and evils must be pointed out plainly in the beginning before you can approach a high goal. Otherwise, people won't seek to attain it. Let's be aware of the dangers and darkness that surround us, dangers that can keep us from reaching our goals. All the nations must work together to address these global problems. Aging, health, and world population quadrupling in the last 100 years, natural disasters, floods, drought, earthquakes, asteroids, coronal mass ejections from the sun, hunger, poverty, unemployment and disease, global pandemics, environmental degradation, deforestation, soil loss, drastic climate change, control of insecticides, extinction of ocean and land species. I just read a report yesterday from the National Oceanographic and Astronomical Administration that 2020 was the worst year for natural disasters due to global warming and the imbalance that humanity is creating in the environment. Most of them were east of the Rockies, but the forest fires put the West into that picture. $22 billion worth of damage, and that's the greatest amount of loss just from national disasters since 1917. Large and small conflicts among national, ethnic, and religious groups, global arms race, nuclear war and terrorism, rogue states or nations, clash of civilizations and ideologies, xenophobia, jingoism, racism, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence and its weapons technology, competition for the natural resources of the planet, waste disposal, economic warfare and economic burden of military expenditures, espionage, world economy, energy supplies, technology and fair trade, migration, displaced populations, genocide, slavery, sex trade and abuse, trafficking, growth hormones, poison, and GMO complications in the food chain. Many of these global problems will require continuous control and management, perhaps indefinitely. Often, these global problems don't seem to concern us directly, that is, until they hurt us directly. Also, the consequences of one problem often bring on other problems, the example being this coronavirus. It's had far-reaching consequences beyond the spread of the disease itself. It's caused the largest global economic recession in history, with more than a third of the population in lockdown. We need greater cooperation. Columbia University professor Jeffrey Sachs, one of the world's leading economists, has written that he believes China and the United States are vital for the world. That's extremely important to set in place a thorough and high-level and extensive, serious interaction between the two countries. So this kind of polemic of demonization of the other nation is a really contrary to the Baha'i view that all are created by God and we are living as one human family. Who do you think you are? We've already looked at these circles of unity. Now, what's interesting is that until we reach this largest circle of unity on the planet, these isolated bonds of unity are what cause the disunity and segregate people. Although ultimately they need not divide us in the future, we must recognize that we are one. A few of our world leaders and rulers seem to understand this. Here's one leader, Harvard professor, U.S. ambassador to Japan, stating that world citizenship education is clearly the biggest educational task of all. For millenniums of history have conditioned men to think in smaller and more exclusive units, while suspicion and hostility toward other groups lie deep in their patterns of thought. A reorientation of education so as to give young people everywhere a sense of the shared interests and basic oneness of humankind, and to prepare them for effective participation as members of a world community is, I believe, a clear necessity for human survival in the 21st century. The principle underlying world citizenship identity is the recognition of oneness, a clear necessity for human survival. Abdu'l-Baha wrote that every child is potentially the light of the world and at the same time its darkness. Therefore, education is of the greatest importance. This appeared on the face of Newsweek magazine, asking the question if the next jihadists are already holding guns. How shall we acculturate the next generation? Humanity is gripped by a crisis of identity. The House of Justice said, we've been living with our us and them mentality for generations. But this us and them mentality equals an us and them mortality. We've got this crisis that's a false perception that we are different peoples, different races, despite the fact that science proves we are all one people, one human race. Let's look a little bit at the cost in the last 150 years. I'm not going to read all of these. These are some of the deaths of the civilian and military population. Many people think the largest civilian group in World War II was the Jewish population, 6 million. Few people realize that China suffered 10 million civilian casualties at the hands of the Japanese. This represents our normal state of alienation, our us and them mentality or perception. The so-called normal men have killed perhaps 100 million of their fellow normal men in the last 80 years. These numbers represent only our time, our enlightened and civilized era, which thinks it's come of age, not the jingoism of previous millennia leading back to antiquity and the destruction of entire civilizations. Developing an emotional sense of world citizenship is clearly the biggest educational task of all, a clear necessity for human survival in the 21st century. And it must spread throughout the whole population. And the time period within which this must be done it may be very short. The emotional sense of world citizenship. This must come from a perception of oneness, much more than from a conception of oneness. It's our perception that grants emotion. This perception can be learned. In the same manner, all perception is learned from a deep understanding, and we can give that through what I'm advocating as a spiral curriculum that continues to deepen each year the same theme of oneness, using science primarily initially, but also the history of humanity and a number of other elements in the curriculum. So how do we do this? In his book, Self Comes to Mind, Constructing the Conscious Brain, the eminent neurologist and neuroscientist Antonio Damasio presents copious evidence that we must enable the conscious mind to find a way into the cognitive unconscious in order to permeate the action machinery. We've heard a lot of news about unconscious bias being the source of the racism that gets demonstrated in the most horrific ways. A lot of it came out in the publicity on police brutality because of the unconscious nature of this process to stereotype, profile, etc. To prevent unconscious thought bias from triggering unconscious knee-jerk actions of bias that are programmed with erroneous information. If we are to prevent the murders that result from racist stereotyping, for example. He advocates educating the cognitive unconscious. This is the ritualized skill building we can create as a spiral curriculum. The non-conscious device must be trained by the conscious mind to deliver an emotional counterpunch. It's an amazing language that's coming out of the new brain science around how we can develop some competency over our emotions. Accurate conceptions precede accurate perception, and an accurate perception can guide our actions unconsciously. This is a concept behind my doctoral dissertation, which I now offer as a spiral curriculum framework. I'm sharing and inviting others to spread throughout the world. Without using the term spiral curriculum to delineate a gradual learning process, Damasio states, I'm not inventing anything new here, but merely outlining a practical mechanism deduced from what I presume the neurological operations of decision and action must be like. For millennia, wise leaders have turned to a comparable solution when they ask followers to observe disciplined rituals whose side effect must have been a gradual imposition of consciously real decisions on non-conscious action processes. So what has come out of the new brain research is that most of our decisions are made unconsciously. We have really very little access to knowing what's going on beneath the threshold of our consciousness, and all of that machinery that brings us into action and decisions. Even at the grocery store, they've done enough research now that if your emotional component of the brain is damaged in some way, people can't even make decisions at the grocery store. So we have to educate the unconscious. Millenniums of history and culture have conditioned us to think in terms of smaller, more exclusive units than being part of the whole of humanity, while unconscious bias, suspicion, and hostility toward other groups lie deep within our patterns of thought. Abdu'l-Baha makes an interesting statement. He says that souls are liable to estrangement. Such methods should be adopted that the estrangement should be first removed, and then the word will have effect. He talks about an education process such that a negligent person could change his ignorance into knowledge. Our culture constantly bombards us with worn-out interpretations of reality. Culture and the socialization process is dictatorial unless understood and examined. It is not that man must be in sync with or adapt to his culture, but that cultures grow out of sync with the reality of man and his new potential for newly heightened awareness. When this happens, people go crazy and they don't know it. In order to avoid mass insanity, people must learn to transcend and adapt their culture to the times and to their biological organisms, which in essence means the way the brain works. This is a statement from some time back. I don't know if you can see this. Edward T. Hall, in a book called Beyond Culture, wrote about this dictatorial nature of our culture, which continually bombards us, and it is the mechanism by which our subconscious is being programmed into stereotyping and into racism. Now, we have wonderful statements throughout history and in all cultures, like this one from Confucius, within 4 C's, all men are brothers. This is simple, and yet it's profound. But Is this noble idea a conception or a perception? Is this great learning a conception or a perception? Beautiful. And I'm suggesting that we have to transform our conception of oneness into a perception of oneness. Beautiful and true statements like this one from Confucius are not enough to change the world, but why not? Because if you do not already have the intuitive sense of this truth, it's just a concept, just an idea. Even those who embrace it may have only an intellectual assent to an idea and no emotional commitment. It's a platitude. Emotional commitments required to change the world. A concept is not an emotion nor a perception. Although accurate knowledge and concepts are essential to develop healthy emotions and can sometimes evoke feelings if deeply understood, the bottom line is human beings are motivated by emotions, feelings, and perceptions more than they're motivated by concepts and ideas. Even the best science metaphors are not enough to give us the emotional sense of oneness with other human beings. Here's a great metaphor from science. This aspen forest in the United States is the largest single living organism on the planet. And although the trees appear as individuals, they come from the same root system, no seeds, and they're genetically identical. In truth, they are one reality. And, you know, if we look at humanity having one genetic basis, it's a similar reality we can talk about. Biologically, we are one. The metaphor is beautiful and true, but not enough to rewire our brains away from the unconscious cultural biases programmed in us for generations. Using the new brain science, what we're trying to gain is the emotional sense as a perception. We have an unprecedented opportunity right now to see ourselves as citizens of planet Earth. COVID-19 and its consequences have increased the recognition of the oneness of humanity because it's taught peoples of the world to view things internationally and interdependently. Most people on the planet now understand the interdependence of all the Earth's peoples in a whole new light, and yet we have more to learn. This is a providential blessing hidden inside this global catastrophe because the obvious and basic challenge in the world is for the people to cooperate and live together. This Chinese symbol for crisis is danger and opportunity combined. A number of analysts have discovered opportunities are created by the crisis. To see them, you can search the internet for blessing in disguise or silver lining plus COVID-19. The problem will be to get the people to retain the commitment to world citizenship once the crisis and the window of opportunity has passed. The evidence shows that the only way for people to have achieved the emotional sense of world citizenship identity is to have understood deeply their connection to everyone else so that they feel the sense of commitment and loyalty to the human race and to its betterment. It will require a special kind of education for them to know the outward oneness they share with everyone else. After recognizing the oneness of humanity, world citizenship becomes an identity and a sense of responsibility is attained. This should also help most people to love others. There's a lot of comment and maybe questions we'll have time for later to fill in between these paragraphs. The pandemic, is it a portal or a portent? Historically, pandemics have forced human beings to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one's no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our dead ideas, our dead bodies, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through, ready to imagine another world. Andrew Hati Roy. Is COVID-19 and its attendant and consequent crises a harbinger of worse things to come or a gateway through which we can pass into another world? The choice may be ours. That's right. It may be that we get to choose whether we use this catastrophe as a portal or wait for some subsequent apocalypse that we're inviting through our ignorance of the cooperation that can be ours if we choose. Can we imagine our new world of unity and begin building it before it's too late? Many old systems that are in self-destruct mode can kill us. We get to choose. The portal pessimists or realists such as Noam Chomsky, Robert Pollin, Stephen Hawking, Jeffrey Sachs, and other scientists argue that if this pandemic does not serve as a portal forcing us to recognize our ecological and political interdependence, a worse crisis will awaken us. In the environment, such as global warming, destruction of the rainforest, ocean species, the world economy, artificial intelligence, or nuclear war. These are the main ones without which the global cooperation we're going to get hit with. They believe a worse catastrophe will force us to recognize our interdependence. That is, if we can survive the next one. And they're not optimistic that COVID-19 is big enough to get our attention. The big opportunity for us in this time of crisis is that all people all over the world now understand how interdependent and connected we are, and that we must have a greater cooperation among the nations and peoples of the world. We have a concept, but we don't have a percept. Conception's not enough. We must have a perception of oneness, not just a conception of oneness, if we're to have this emotional sense. We're challenged by the us and them mentality and our propensity for treating others badly. And I'm not discussing the philosophical nature of evil, but rather man's inhumanity to man, neurobiologically wired for prejudice by absorbing cultural bias unconsciously. Culture is dictatorial in negatively programming each successive generation, and it must be changed. It is evident that humanity cannot deal with its global problems without greater cooperation, and that the us and them mentality is killing us and has been for millennia. So let's take a closer look at our history of us and them, the consequences of a divided humanity. And I apologize for this in advance, and it's a little graphic, so I just, if you're too sensitive to these images, you may wish to avoid some of them. This history, his story of all these peoples that preceded us in generations is really our story. It's the story of the human race. What's our most fundamental human problem? Civilizations have been wiped out to advance civilizations. The U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry massacred the ghost dancers at Wounded Knee. Native Americans were slaughtered in the name of civilization. These beautiful people virtually wiped out. European and Asian wars, slavery, kidnapped from their native lands and brought to other countries. Looking at the past, 51,000 human beings in the United States killed each other in one day, in one battle, during the American Civil War. More than the entire number of Americans killed in Vietnam over 11 years. Ideology killed them, not bullets. This is Nazi Germany, Poland. This was unnecessary, by the way. Subsequent historical analysts have determined that these two bombs were not necessary. Soldiers assaulted hundreds of thousands of women across Germany during World War II. And since in Central Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. It's one of the aspects of war we don't talk about. More than 4,000 Black Americans were lynched by white Americans between 1865 and 1965. I'm sorry. Show you this. America the Beautiful, melting pot of diversity. This is a painting my mother did when I was in high school. So it's on the wall behind me, if you can see it, a corner of it. Still have it. I don't have any words for this. These were called race riots. In Rwanda, 800,000 people were slaughtered in 90 days. And the world stood by and let it happen. President Clinton and Madeleine Albright called it the worst mistake of their career. So here's the latest chapter. What we're seeing, what we've been seeing this last year. Am I next? The disproportionate suffering from the COVID. One of the worst features of the recent racism is that the new racists are proud to promote the fears of white. They're actually defending racism, and the same thing's happening with atheism, by the way, to the extent that it's an attack on religion itself. Now we live in a digital age with digital walls and invasion, suspicion, fear, hostility. As forms of espionage, cyber warfare, military weaponry, artificial intelligence, and computer technology, AI has become a threat to peace and security, amplifying our false perception of us and them. Stephen Hawking went to his deathbed saying it's the greatest danger facing humanity, artificial intelligence. Remember where we are. We live on an insignificant speck of dust floating in the vastness of space. The cosmos will not miss us if we disappear. Our problems have become too great for a single nation alone, or for only a few nations together to solve them. We must see our interdependence and work together, or we all perish together. Again, millenniums of history have conditioned us into this unconscious bias. What are we going to do about it? What is it? What are we going to do about ourselves to overcome ourselves? This is that quote from Edward Hall again. It's dictatorial unless it's understood and examined culture. Somehow these got in here twice. Okay. The emotional sense of us and them, what we have now, versus the emotional sense of oneness and world citizenship, what we need. How are we going to get there? To transform this emotional sense of separation and exclusion of others, we must try to understand how the neurological mechanism by which this emotional sense is generated. Networks in the brain, which we call emotional networks, are processing knowledge unconsciously, making most of our decisions for us. These decisions result in actions that reflect our prejudices, assumptions, interpretations, and biases, and we don't often know we even have them. The simple process of speaking is the most common example of unconscious processing that everyone is familiar with. You do not think about every word you're going to say. Your words are chosen for you unconsciously based on your understanding of the idea that you want to convey. Unconscious understanding is the mysterious key to all unconscious bias and behavior. It grants the emotional sense of things for us. This emotional sense is our most important sense or perception. I'll try to explain that a little better here in a minute. Similar to prejudice, our emotions escape our discernment. Leading neuroscientists have called this unconscious decision making in the brain. Emotions, they are extensions of the survival mechanism evolved to keep us alive. But the word no longer represents feelings, which are now defined as that state when emotions come into our conscious awareness. So emotions, we don't actually have any access to at all, they're saying. It's only our feeling of our emotions that we're experiencing. These scientists speak of feeling and emotion as being uniquely human. Surprisingly, emotions make most of our decisions every day. They began as a survival mechanism attempting to balance the homeostasis and ensure our survival. They also make daily decisions in the marketplace I mentioned. So the emotional system surfaces into conscious awareness as our decisions and as feelings. This is where they become perceptible to us individually in our lives. Otherwise, they're invisible to ourselves, and they run our lives unconsciously, sometimes ruining our lives. Edward Reischauer said that most people are probably not conscious that our traditional education is overwhelmingly about our own particular group, and thus tends to build a strong sense of identity with it to the exclusion of other members of the human race who do not even qualify for membership. In Central Europe, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania, certainly World War II, Jews were called rats, Croatians were called rats. In Rwanda, an entire nursery of young orphans was exterminated in one day, calling them cockroaches. So as soon as you dehumanize a group of people, you can exterminate them. Our education is largely to blame for this. What if it were the opposite? What if all the false ideas about who we are, this us and them stuff, were replaced with just a knowledge of who we are? we could see the other as ourself. The same reality we know ourselves to be, we could see in the other. But it's going to take what I am referring to as a spiral curriculum, not my idea. It was developed at Harvard by Jerome Bruner. And it's the idea that you can introduce simple concepts at any age and develop them into deeper concepts year after year, increasing the understanding. We don't realize we see everything this way. We see everything that we have through interpretation based on the past, including our worldview. It's time we look to the future based on our present knowledge of who we are. It colors everything. It taints everything we see and everything we think. We're conditioned to repeat the errors of our fathers if we continue to think the way they did. So we go back to that hidden word. We're created from the same dust so that no man would exalt himself above another. What if all the cultures had education systems that showed that everyone inherited all the cultures of the world? Wouldn't every child see the history of everyone as their own history? What if pondering how you were created involved understanding that everyone is the product of one evolutionary life system and process? What if education science continually emphasized and reminded us of our interdependence, our oneness, and how we came to exist? Conceptions of oneness become perceptions of oneness of all life and one's place within the natural order of things and within the Earth's ecosystem. What if our conceptions became perceptions of our reality? This perceptual change is based on exploiting the findings from the recent brain research, which has revealed how the visual system relies on 600% to 1,000% more than it does from data impulses streaming from the neurons from the eyes to the brain. In other words, what we're seeing, a policeman profiling someone, for example, they see their interpretation of reality. They don't see reality. It's all based on past associations. We don't see what we know. We see what we think we know. So we have to understand even the process of vision is deceiving us. It's based on everything we've been conditioned to believe. The process of education then is to replace or preempt this erroneous information and invalid experience with truth-based knowledge. The most important thing to know is that our understanding, or that which stands under our conscious awareness, can be based on faulty knowledge and conclusions, or it can be based on real knowledge and facts, the science of reality, and on well-reasoned conclusions that genuine consultation can agree upon.
Excuse me, Greg, may I interrupt? I'm sorry. We have gone beyond our time for today. So if you are able to wrap up in like 1 minute or so, that would be great. And the other thing is, if we could probably invite you back another time also to go more in depth into this very interesting, these concepts about how we learn and what we retain and the way we think based on those things. And as far as the questions and answers, I'm going to ask that we, and this is due to my own error, ask Don Erdman to do his musical presentation, which we asked him to come to do today after that. And then if people still have questions for you, which I'm certain they do, we can do that after that, if that is okay with you, Greg.
Yes, certainly. I apologize. Adding the Baha'i quotes certainly lengthened the presentation. Believe it or not, this entire presentation was done in 50 minutes originally. I'm going to end with one more slide here. And I think it's important to understand that unconscious bias doesn't necessarily have to be negative. We can program our unconscious bias to be positive if it's based on the truth. So this will replace the conception of oneness with the perception of oneness in every culture. And the premise is simply that knowing myself as a human being and knowing what a human being is before I know myself as a black man or a white man, an Arab, a Jew, a Christian or Muslim, American or Chinese, male or female even, will enable me to see the same reality as myself in others. If so, then what is the knowledge of what it means to be human in the outward collective sense? And how do I obtain that knowledge and experience in a way that gives me the emotional sense of identity with all people, giving me the ability to see reality? Who are we? So we've really scratched the surface, and we need to begin to build on what we know is the truth. Everything was created from nothing, and we're practically going to have to completely throw out the culture and our education system to start over. I'm going to end there, and you can see there are quite a few slides remaining. These are beautiful pictures. I presented this in China, and the reception was wonderful. I am so impressed with the Chinese and their acceptance of unity. Okay.
Well, thank you, Greg, for that really, truly an enlightening and in-depth presentation. I'm sure the community would love to have you come back and finish the rest of that out with a recap of some of what you presented today at some future point. That, what you talked about, the concept of oneness being deceptively simple, but it's where we are now. And we must all come together and work together to address and solve our global problems for our own collective survival. And we need this world citizenship education because our perception of oneness is more necessary than our conception of oneness. So let's imagine our new world and begin building it. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask us to hold our questions and comments momentarily so that Don can do his music.
Thank you. I really would offer a workshop on this if you're interested.
It's good to know.
I apologize for going over time.
Oh, it's okay. Don is going to present, not the healing prayer. He's going to do his own music. Thank you.
Ready?
Yes.
Right. I'm going to perform a song called God is Sufficient Unto Me, played on clarinet.
Thank you, Don. That was beautiful. Anyone not speaking or presenting at the moment, kindly mute yourself. Thank you so much, Don. And thank you so much for your patience and forbearance regarding my oversight. I really apologize for not being in order today. Thank you. And, we can go back to Greg's presentation. If you have any questions or comments. I noticed there were some comments in the chat. Anyone have anything that they wanted to address to Greg directly? Now it appears folks have been stunned into silence, Greg. There was so much information in your presentation.
Lee is raising her hand as if she can't turn on her microphone.
Who is? I can't see anything.
Hello. I just wanted to mention, just make a comment that you were mentioning education's role in changing this whole conception or of how we are, that, you know, that we need to learn to be world citizens. And I'd like to suggest unityworks.org is an organization that works with elementary through 12th grade students to work with students to help them understand this idea of world citizenship. It's been very powerful in elementary schools. They had one program where they gave different pigment colors out to all of the first graders and had them paint a portrait of each other. And all of the children realized that all of them have these pigments and these colors. It was very, they're working on that very concept. So that's unityworks.org. And it was founded by Baha'is and a friend of mine, Randy Gottlieb. Yeah.
I know Randy and her work, and we've discussed some of these things, and it is a wonderful resource. And it's the kind of thing that I'm speaking about needing to go into schools, into the mainstream of school curricula, and actually suggesting that it has to be so ubiquitous that it's not adjunct material and should not just be add-on curricula or adjunct courses, but every course in the curricula should be reviewed and have this overarching conceptual framework if we're going to be able to have this hidden word fulfilled, that we ponder how we've been created at all times. He says, Baha'u'llah says, ponder at all times how you're created. How do you do this at all times? So that's the idea of a spiral curriculum, and a curriculum that invades every subject within the curriculum.
Great.
The challenge has been, it's been the choice of the superintendents and those that are in charge, whether they would elect to bring this group in. But that's one of the big challenges, is getting them to see the need and bring Unity Works in.
It's one of the reasons why I like to point out all these evils in our past history. It helps people get to the sense of seeing the need.
Thank you, Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or thoughts about Greg's presentation? There's a lot of information.
I think how to do this is very consequential or just automatic, or we'll figure that part out if we decide why we should do it and if we decide to do it. So I'm at the stage I'm thinking where people have to be convinced of the necessity of it having a dominant position in the curriculum or becoming the essence of the curriculum if humanity is to survive. So the why is even bigger than the how.
Anyone else? Anything to share on this subject?
I see William nodding. That's not William.
No, that's Elizabeth.
That's Elizabeth.
Well, friends, thank you so much for listening and bearing with the program today that I got slightly out of order. At this time, we'd like to, well, I want to thank Greg again for that outstanding presentation, and I'm sure that there will be some interest in having you come back and expound a little further on some of, you'll probably have some additional insights by the time you do that. So I'm sure it'd be welcome. Thank you so much. At this time, we'd like to welcome all of our guests to the Baha'i Unity Center's Sunday morning devotional program. If you are new to this gathering, or if you've been here many times before, feel free to share who you are, where you're from, and how you happen to be with us today. And this includes Baha'is visiting from out of town and sojourners recently returned to the area. We'd love to hear from you. Well, it looks like we don't have anyone new today. So we're gonna move on. A couple of very quick announcements. Next week's speaker will be Burton T. Smith, who will present on the interracial Baha'i couple David and Joy Earl, about whom he has a wealth of little known facts. And followed the week after by Ruha Sobani on January 24th. So be sure to stop in for another outstanding presentation. Watch for details sometime later this week. Also, please remember the food distribution program every Thursday from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. at the Baha'i Unity Center in the parking lot. Please spread the word to help combat food insecurity within the community. And for members of the Baha'i faith, you are warmly encouraged to make a financial contribution to the South DeKalb Baha'i Fund and the National Baha'i Fund through the online contribution system. Just log in at ocs.baha'i.us, then select the My Locality tab. There are no other announcements. Many thanks to all who worked together to make today's program possible. And thanks to all of you for sharing your day with us today.
Lee has her hand up again.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask, what is another way that we can contribute to the South DeKalb community other than the automatic online system? Because we're visiting from another community, so we are linked with our own Baha'i fund community, but we want to contribute to yours.
Barbara, please answer.
You can always mail it in, and I can give you the address.
Thank you, please. Would
Okay.
you want to put it in the chat?
Yes.
Here? Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you for asking, Lee. Thank you. So we will end now. Until next time, everyone stay safe and well. And we will end now with the closing prayer for the departed. And you can call to mind silently those you wish to remember through this prayer. Glory be to thee, O Lord my God. Abase not him whom thou hast exalted through the power of thine everlasting sovereignty, and remove not far from thee him whom thou hast caused to enter the tabernacle of thine eternity. Wilt thou cast away, O my God, him whom thou hast overshadowed with thy lordship? And wilt thou turn away from thee, O my desire, him to whom thou hast been a refuge? Canst thou degrade him whom thou hast uplifted, or forget him whom thou didst enable to remember thee? Glorified, immensely glorified art thou. Thou art he who from everlasting hath been the king of the entire creation and its prime mover. And thou wilt to everlasting remain the Lord of all created things and their ordainer. Glorified art thou, O my God. If thou ceasest to be merciful unto thy servants, who then will show mercy unto them? And if thou refusest to succor thy loved ones, who is there that can succor them? Glorified, immeasurably glorified art thou. Thou art adored in thy truth, and thee do we all verily worship. And thou art manifest in thy justice, and to thee do we all verily bear witness. Thou art in truth beloved in thy grace. No God is there but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Thank you, friends, for joining us this week. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, and hopefully you can rejoin us again next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, Pa.
Aloha.
Aloha.
See you next time, friends.